Welcome back. The psychologist couple who influenced the decision in Brown v. Board of Education, a couple in love and on purpose. The first time research influenced a U.S. Supreme Court decision, the research was conducted by a black couple, Mamie Phipps Clark and Kenneth Bancroft Clark. I'll introduce them to you based on their date of births. Who was born first? On July 24th, 1914, Kenneth Bancroft Clark was born to Jamaican-born Arthur Bancroft Clark and Miriam Hanson Clark in the Panama Canal Zone. The family relocated to Harlem, New York City when Clark was 4 years old. Clark studied at public schools 5 and 139, where he excelled. Further, he attended, quote, the prestigious George Washington College Preparatory High School in Washington Heights, end quote. In 1931, he attended the renowned historical Black College, Howard University in Washington, D.C., with the goal of becoming a medical doctor. However, after taking a psychology class led by Dr. Francis Cecil Sumner, who was the first African American to receive a Ph.D. in psychology, he switched his major to psychology. Howard University provided Clark with a rich array of mentors such as Dr. Sumner, UN diplomat and activist Ralph Bunche, philosopher Alain Locke, and sociologist Franklin Frazier. The CUNY website states, Clark graduated Phi Beta Kappa from Howard University in 1935 with 2 psychology degrees, a bachelor's and a master's, and returned to teach psychology there between 1937 through 1938. It was during this time at Howard that Clark met freshman student Mamie Phipps, whom he would elope with and marry in 1938. When she was in her senior year of her undergraduate degree, she became his lifelong collaborator. Now please permit me to introduce the amazing Mamie Phipps Clark of Hot Springs, Arkansas. Phipps was born April 18th, 1917, one of 4 children to black parents, Kate Florence and Dr. Harold H. Phipps. I said black parents because the man is a doctor and sometimes people will mistake that for being white. Her father gained financial success as a doctor, a role rarely held by a black person at that time. Dr. Phipps also had a side job as a manager of a vacation resort in Arkansas. As a result, Mamie Phipps's mother, Kate, was able to work as a stay-at-home caregiver for her children and family. Later, Mamie Phipps attributed most of her success to her loving, protective, and supportive upbringing. However, while Phipps had a privileged home life, she still lived in the Jim Crow segregated South of the USA. She witnessed racism firsthand in segregated schools. Phipps stated, quote, "You have to have a certain kind of protective armor about you all the time. You learn the things not to do so as to protect yourself," end quote. In 1934, she graduated from high school and received multiple merit scholarship offers from historically black colleges. Though it was the Great Depression, a financially difficult time, Phipps's parents insisted that she attend college. Phipps went to Howard University on a merit scholarship. When she entered Howard University, she was sure she wanted to help children and thought she could do so as a teacher of math and physics. But she experienced the professors in those departments as being unsupportive and cold. But then she met her future life partner and fellow student, Kenneth Clark, who later described their meeting as, quote, prophetic, end quote. Clark introduced her to his professors in the psychology department and encouraged her to study psychology. She did so whilst knowing that she would have a hard time finding a job as a black woman, and she graduated magna cum laude with a BA in psychology. Mamie Phipps greatly influenced the direction of the couple's future work. Phipps's academic interests were impacted by the summer between completing her undergraduate studies and starting her master's in psychology. At that time, she worked as a secretary in the office of the NAACP lawyer. She was also impacted by her work in an all African American nursery school. Her master's thesis was driven by these experiences and was entitled, quote, "The Development of Consciousness in Negro Preschool Children," end quote. The research was conducted on 150 preschool-age boys and girls. The core issues were race and child development. Specifically, the research question was, at what age did a child become aware that the child was African American? So it was around the issue of black identity, like this channel is about a positive black identity. Okay, I won't gush too much. Between 1939 and 1940, the Clarks published 3 major articles based on Mamie's thesis. During the same period, the Clarks commenced their PhDs in psychology at Columbia University, Kenneth in 1937 and Mamie in 1940. They were the only African Americans in the psychology department. Kenneth Clark chose Columbia University because he wanted to directly challenge a racist eugenicist professor, Dr. Henry Garrett. At the time, psychology was primarily a pseudoscience that supported white supremacy. While completing her PhD, Mamie Clark gave birth to their first child, Kate, named after her mother. It's sweet. She had their second child, Hilton, in 1943 when she graduated with her PhD. Between 1940 to 1943, the Clarks collaborated and conducted research on racial identity in children, and these research were funded by the prestigious Julius Rosenwald Fellowships. Post their PhDs, both Clarks struggled to obtain suitable employment. For example, Mamie Clark, after working as the testing psychologist at Riverdale Home for unhoused children, she recognized there were insufficient mental health services for black children in Harlem. When the government was unresponsive to her advocacy for more services, the Clarks took matters into their own hands and founded the Northside Center for Child Development in 1946. Quote, "It was the first and only organization in the city that provided mental health services to African American children. Northside offered psychological testing, psychiatric services, social services, and academic services, and became a center of activism and advocacy for Harlem and its residents. Clark ran Northside until her retirement in 1979. The center continues today," end quote. After Columbia, Dr. Kenneth Clark joined the psychology department at the City College of New York as an instructor teaching evening psychology courses. After one semester at City College, Dr. Clark went to teach at Hampton Institute and then at Queens College for a semester each. Dissatisfied with both those experiences, in 1941 through 1942, Clark worked for the Office of War Information in Washington, D.C. He studied the morale of African Americans on the home front during World War I and II. Returning to City College in the fall of 1942, Clark taught social psychology until 1975 when he retired from teaching. But how did the Clarks become involved in the Brown versus Board of Education desegregation case? I'm so glad you asked. In the 1940s, Mamie Clark created and implemented psychological research called the doll test. Sexist history books attempted to attribute the creation of the test to her husband Kenneth, but Kenneth wrote, quote, "The record should show it was Mamie's primary project that I crashed. I sort of piggybacked on it." So he was a true gentleman who cited her for her work. In the doll test, the Clarks looked at 253 African American children aged 3 to 7. 134 attended segregated nursery schools in Arkansas and 119 attended integrated schools in Massachusetts. Shown 4 dolls, 2 with white skin and blonde hair, 2 with brown skin and black hair. Children were asked to identify the race of the doll and which they wanted to play with. Overwhelmingly, the children wanted to play with a white doll and assigned it positive traits. The Clarks concluded that African American children formed a racial identity by age 3, and attached negative traits to their own identity, which were then perpetuated by segregation and prejudice, end quote. Their work on the doll test led to Dr. Mamie Clark testifying in many school desegregation cases. In the Brown v. Board of Education case, Dr. Mamie Clark testified against her racist, eugenicist, PhD advisor, Dr. Henry Garrett. Of course, you already know her testimony was one of the deciding factors in the case that desegregated schools. And a fun fact, the Clark family hosted one of the Little Rock 9 students. I have a video on that, and her name was Minnie Jean Brown. Quote, one of the historic Little Rock 9 lived in Hastings, 1958 through 1959. Minnie Jean came to Hastings when she was 16 after having been harassed, threatened, and ultimately expelled for verbal retaliation from the Arkansas high school she helped integrate in 1957. She spent the rest of her high school career living on Pinecrest Drive at the home of Drs. Kenneth and Mamie Clark, with their children Hilton and Kate attending New Lincoln High School in Harlem, from which she graduated on June 5th, 1959. So these Clarks were all up in it. Dr. Mamie Phipps Clark died of lung cancer on August 11, 1983, at the age of 66. She was survived by her husband Kenneth, who passed away in 2005. I don't know about you, maybe it's because they're psychologists or researchers, but I just thought this was such an amazing story of a couple that was obviously, as Kenneth said, this was prophetic. They're meant to be together. They're meant to study psychology. They're meant to desegregate the school. They're meant to do so many things. It's so beautiful to see purpose and love together, and love for our community. But you tell me what you think. Thanks so much for listening.